Hey guys, it's Swinman here. Welcome back to Your Money Game. And today's episode, we're going to talk about, do you really know where your money is going? So this video is for those of you who've ever wondered, what the heck happened to all my money? Or if you don't really know if you're saving any money or what you're doing with those savings. Or you've kind of lost track of how many people you owe, how many companies you owe, and all the other different kind of liabilities that you have in your life. So one of the challenges that I see, not only in my friends, but people in general, is trying to figure out where to start. One of the first fundamental skills to have is figuring out awareness. The reason why I think it's a skill is that it's not something that might be natural to some of us, and especially if you related to some of the statements I mentioned earlier. Awareness also helps you figure out if any of your money is being lazy. That simply means that money has just been sitting there, it's not being put into use. And finally, if you have awareness, it really helps you figure out which investments of yours are kind of helping you out and which are kind of just not really serving your purpose. So I'm not going to assume that awareness is something that's just like super easy for us to pick up. So I know that there are a few barriers, and with some of those barriers, there are ways to kind of overcome it as well. So what I'm going to go through is a few different barriers as well as the solutions that I think can help you overcome them. So the first barrier is a hassle, and it's not a habit that we naturally kind of have. So like any habits, when you start, it's not normal. So one of the ways to overcome the hassle and difficulty of starting a new habit is to see at what points can you automate it. One of the possibilities is that with your bank account, whether it's a credit card, debit card, with the age of digital banking, what's happening is a lot of these bank apps are already kind of evolving to help tell you in greater clarity where your money is going in the different categories that you spend on. So it automatically kind of categorizes things for you, and you're able to see at one end monthly statement what is it you're spending on. So for me personally, how I started with tracking was to use a very manual way. I was literally using an Excel sheet, typing in different categories, typing in how much I spend on a daily basis. But one thing's for sure is that I didn't really track as diligently as I could, and that gradually evolved to kind of like a hybrid method of what I use right now. There's this app that I use called Money Manager. I'm not paid by them, or this isn't an endorsement. There are many other different apps that kind of perform the same function. So why I particularly like this app is that you're able to, at a very quick touch of a button, launch the app, log in a purchase with a matter of a very few clicks. And I think it reduces the barrier to taking action and logging what it is you purchase. And on top of that, they already have categories that you can kind of like assign your cost or spending to. By doing that, you're able to kind of capture all that information. And what's kind of neat is they also are able to output it into a graph. So you're able to see in a nice visual way what is it you've been spending on. So the moment I sit down, I will open the app, and if I've spent something within the past hour, I'll just click a button to log that purchase, and it has now become a natural habit. The practice is to see where you can find that little slot of literally a few seconds for you to be able to input what is it you spent on. And once you start that ball rolling, it becomes really easy to kind of continue doing it. So what I do after that is I don't use that app only in isolation. I actually pair it with Google Sheets. So with the app, I capture my daily expenses. But what I do with Google Sheets is that I have a monthly and a consolidated figure. I'm kind of using those hand in hand to be able to give me a bigger picture, especially during the bigger audits, which I'll kind of get into later. Although I mentioned apps or digital means as a way to kind of track your spending, but you really don't have to. If you really feel more comfortable with pen and paper, that's perfectly fine. But I think the principle is, if you're going to pick up a habit that you are not very used to or you're not naturally comfortable with, I think the question is, what's the tool that you're going to use to enable that habit to naturally form in a very easy way? So the next two barriers are really kind of interrelated. One is a bit of a fear of knowing, and the other is that I don't really know what to look for. All these fears can build up, and especially if you're a little bit older, maybe in your 30s, and if you've not seriously sat down and really looked at your finances, that can be a very daunting thing. So alongside that fear, not knowing what to look for is also a thing. So with these two barriers, I think there are a few ways to kind of overcome them. One is that you likely already have some form of insurance person. I understand some of you hearing that might be going like, oh, but they're kind of not impartial and they're there to sell you stuff. But at the same time, if you do have a good relationship with your insurance person, they're usually good enough to kind of like give you a basic overview of what you should be kind of looking at. So at the very minimum, they're able to kind of give you the overview of all the products that you've bought from them, how they've been doing, and it's there where you can kind of get clarity of like how much are those liabilities that you have. A bit of a side note, let's just face it, a lot of key consulting services, and again, if somebody's sitting there with you trying to figure out your finances, which might not be very easy, they're taking away their time and trying to help you out. And the reason why insurance agents or other guys that are trying to sell you stuff are doing it is because there's a financial incentive behind it, right? So one way to avoid the scenario where they're just trying to push products on you and not putting you or putting your needs first is to pay for that service for a person that is impartial. And usually with those kind of services, what you're at least assured of is an objective perspective, because their incentives are not tied towards the money that you are kind of investing with them or buying from them. So finally, if you're able to kind of overcome that little bit of a fear to take that step to really spend half a day putting down all your kind of your expenditure and your financial assets onto paper, I think that's a step that everybody should do regardless of whether or not you have a professional helping you out. So for me, what I try and do is I capture first of all what my assets are and where are they. So in my scenario, it's slightly unique because again, I've started in Malaysia, I've got money there, then I moved to Singapore, I've got money here. So the need to have that one master overview was very important. So listing down where literally what bank accounts I have, how much I have in it, at what point in time, that's something that's a useful start. So assets aside, the other thing to kind of take note of is what are the different liabilities that you have. Again, for me in Malaysia, I have a few insurance products which I've bought. Now coming to Singapore, I've got a whole new set of them as well. So it becomes a little bit of a messy situation, but putting aside the fear, sitting down and listing it out on an Excel sheet really helps you kind of like see what are the different things that you really owe, and at least having a consolidated view of all the different liabilities that you have. Finally, it's investments. And this is where, depending on whether you've started or not, it's still something that's really useful to do. Whatever money that you've kind of placed, whether you've bought a unit trust, a stock, index fund, ETF, it doesn't matter. But what I personally do is have a point in which I purchased it, and then assuming I've held it for a long time, I have periodic points of value. So say for example, I bought something at $100 2 years ago, but at the end of the year, I'll still want to do like what was the value of it in, like say at the start of 2020. So that way I'm able to see the starting point which I bought it, the value pegged to a certain time, and I'm able to kind of track that over a certain period. And that at least helps me to see what exactly is happening with the investment that I purchased. So the reason why that's important is to have that overview of the different investments you have and whether or not it's performing as what you expected it to. So to sum things up, awareness is a key foundational skill that if you build it, it will really last you for the long term. And the 3 different things that you can kind of really do, especially if you're at a starting point right now, is first of all is to set up a habit to track your spending in a way that you think you can easily do and follow through. So the second thing is, after you've begun to track your spending, eventually you get to a point where you can predictably see how much money you're saving, and then you can kind of figure out what you want to do with it. Finally, I think it's really important for you to do a periodic audit, do a monthly one, so you can kind of like do a end of month consolidated spend, and then you can see again like how I do it. I'll just put in a few notes of what exactly were the bigger spends that I might not have foreseen, or where I've tracked myself with regard to my budgeting. So that brings us to the end of the video. Thanks so much for watching, guys. I really appreciate it. If you've gotten any value out of this, please give me a thumbs up. Share it with your friends who you think might benefit from this, and feel free to subscribe for more videos in the future. And remember to keep playing your own game.